Listen, I have an admission. I haven't received the lapel mic.
Oh no, naughty Amazon. You said about you were on lockdown, obviously hunkered down with your gorgeous little family. I saw
Yeah.
a brilliant video on YouTube of you doing a number of Mr. Swallow skits
Yeah.
with your
Yeah.
kiddies. And
Yeah.
one of my big questions to you is, so for those who are listening who don't know who Mr. Swallow is, Mr. Swallow, I was about to say, you should introduce, who is Mr. Swallow?
Oh God. Well, Mr. Swallow is a kind of a hybrid of lots of things, but it's a character that I do that I started doing. I guess I started doing properly when I was at university, but it was as like a sketch basically. But it's based on a teacher, a real teacher from high school. In fact, my English teacher, and she and she doesn't know, and she, you know what, she may well have passed away. I actually don't know, but she was kind of incredible, northern, just quite camp, but really opinionated, like really opinionated, and basically used our English lessons as a platform for spouting sometimes genuinely quite questionable views on anything from like capital punishment to racism. And we were like, I mean, are we meant to be just, I thought we were meant to be looking at, whatever we were reading during English at that point.
Yeah.
And we just found her really funny. Like me and my mates, who I'm still good mates with now, and they do they do an impression of her as sort of as well as I do, and it is, it sounds like, it is that kind of like, oh my God. But yeah, in terms of the sort of fictional creation, he's like this he just sort of a jack of all trades, master of none. I mean, he tries his hand at everything. I mean, he's sort of like he's an actor, entertainer, sort of motivational speaker. He's all these things that kind of put him on a platform, but he's just not really good at any of those, and he just is very easily distracted, and he's an absolute lunatic.
Tell me what the speech is that you've picked for us to have a little chat about.
I mean, I should first off say that I am not in any way classically trained or have a reputation for delivering speeches, or I've never done like audition pieces. So
if an hour of Mr. Swallow is not a speech, I don't know what is.
Well, actually, that's true. Yeah, he would think that, but I don't know if I would class it as that. But so, listen. So the thing I have chosen, but partly because of the things that it will hopefully spur us to be able to talk about, is the epilogue to A Midsummer Night's Dream, the speech that Puck makes. Partly because we did it at school, and we did it with the English teacher who Mr. Swallow is based on, and also, so I did my undergraduate at Durham and then did postgraduate at Cambridge, which was sort of where I guess I started doing comedy with like footlights and things. But I was still passionate about comedy at Durham, but I'd auditioned for the Durham Review, which is sort of, the sketch group there, and had not got in. So I was sort of not a frustrated sort of comedy performer. I was still doing quite a lot of magic at the time, but I did a few plays, and the one that I did where I didn't have just a tiny part in was A Midsummer Night's Dream, and I was playing Puck. And it was honestly like, if you imagine the most cliched student production of Shakespeare imaginable, then I mean this will surpass all those expectations.
Do you remember, so when you were Puck, were you aware of, certainly with the speech that you have picked, that epilogue that is so famous, even back then, were you thinking, oh, how do I make this different? Were you aware of thinking, how do I make this mine?
No, sadly not. I think what I hope I didn't put any innuendo in it, because this isn't any.
You say that. Let me have a look. Let's see if we can.
Is there some?
I mean, no, there shouldn't be.
This was the effect of The Office, actually. Like when The Office came out in early 2000, late 90s, early 2000s, or certainly when it was being rerun and was becoming huge. I think that was like early 2000s. And I'm sure a lot of people couldn't help but be affected by how brilliant that show was. But to the extent that, I mean, it literally affected our speech patterns. I mean,
Yes.
probably me even saying literally like that is probably from The Office.
That's so true.
There was so much like, yeah, well, all that kind of slightly kind of awkward stuff and the naturalism. So I think I probably made it feel very, very naturalistic, but in a way that is not written like that.
Would you like to hear the official term for the meter of Puck's closing speech?
Yeah, is it iambic pentameter? Oh yeah.
It's not. It's not.
Is it not?
It's not.
No.
It's neither iambic nor pentameter. It is
okay.
something called, and I haven't memorized this, I'm reading it, catalectic trochaic tetrameter.
Yeah, geez. So
Which
what does that mean?
Apparently means, so tetrameter means 4
that
beats
must be 4,
rather than pentameter, which is 5. Trochaic is the opposite of iambic. So iambic is da 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 da, and trochaic is da 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 da.
Oh my goodness me!
And then
wow.
catalectic means missing off the beat at the end. So so actually they don't do that for the first 2 lines. It's like, if we shadows have offended, that full line, think but this and all is mended. But then that you have but slumbered here misses a beat.
Yeah.
While these visions did appear, misses a beat.
Ah.
Da, 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 da,
You see,
da, 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 da.
you see, Lucy, this is the kind of research I should have been doing when I was doing it. Whereas I was like, I don't know if Shakespeare's heard of The Office. When we did Shakespeare at school with the teacher who Mr. Swallow's based on, she kind of made it even more difficult for us to kind of tune into it, because she was so into the sound of her own voice that she would kind of keep her head sort of in the book, and we were meant to be reading it as a class, and she'd be like, right, who wants to play Portia? I'll do that then. Who wants to play Bassanio? I'll do that then. And she wouldn't look up, but like people were like, yeah, I'll play, I'll do that. I'll play Lysander, or I'll play. And so she would then have all the parts. So then she would then read it, but like it'd be like, okay, in sooth I know not why you are sad. Why are you sad? And so we just couldn't follow it. Like, we didn't know who was speaking. So she just made it so confusing.
She was a real life Bottom from A Midsummer Night's Dream. She's like, I'll play that part.
Yeah.
I'll play that part.
Yeah. She completely was. Yeah.
Before we just hear the speech at the end, it would be remiss of me to not just ask you a bit about Ted Lasso. When season 2 finale came out and you put that really interesting sort of list of thoughts on Twitter, and if no one's seen that, then go and find Nick's Twitter and read it. I loved how you were pointing out things from the first season. So were you aware from the first season, I guess the writers must have been thinking, if we're lucky enough to get this extended, if this goes down well, did they know that's where they wanted Nate to go?
Completely. Right. I mean, like Jason, I remember we were filming episode 4 or 3 of season 1, and him sitting down and saying, so this is what, if we get a season, this is where it's going. Right. And so but bear this in mind when this and this. And so, I mean, they're so clever. It was every single thing. And, not just in Nate's story, but in Ted's and Rebecca, like there are so many just, they've planted so many seeds. They're just such a great writing, creative force. I mean, like they, and it's brilliant because now we're into end of the 2nd season. It's just sort of aired. You can absolutely go back, and there are these sort of Easter eggs of kind of like, oh, that's why, and it does all add up. It absolutely all adds up, and it'll all add up by the end of season 3 as well. I remember always wanting to kind of push for him being vulnerable, and even in that like horrible scene between at the end of episode 12, the season finale, when he lays into Ted. He's like he's really like, he's saying you should be back home with your effing son and all that kind of stuff. Like, obviously that's so horrible, but I almost think Nate is more vulnerable than Ted in that moment. Because,
I completely agree, actually. I completely agree. I found that hard to watch, and not because of the cruelty of what Nate was saying, because of just the sadness of this man, like the way in which like you say, the fragility of this man.
and again, it's all in the writing, because because they did such a great job in season 1 of making an audience root for an underdog, because we're naturally inclined to it's almost a trope, right, to be like, oh, the underdog does good and he gets promoted, and this is great, and we love that. And they were like, little do we know that we're just it's part of a massive downward spiral, and it's because there's further to fall, and it is to take an audience on a bigger journey. And hats off to them for being so bold with it. It's brilliant. Literally, it's my mum's reaction to it was like, well, you didn't tell me that this happened. She's
didn't tell them they did that to you.
Well, why are you behaving like that? It's like, it's fiction and I don't write it.